LSU taking the podium at SEC Media Days for a first time in Nashville, but not for a first time here, of course. We appreciate Carter being here. It is Power Hour LSU. It's Power Hour SEC right here on YouTube. Get on over there. And, of course, Carter the Power joining us as always. What's going on, man?
Nothing much. You know, I get excited for SEC Media Days. I used to go every year, and I still get excited for it, right? Just because it's something, right? We're so football hungered at this point, and for the second consecutive year, LSU went on the first day, but I've been keeping up with all these press conferences, Mark, and they've had some interesting quips, but a whole lot of coach speak as well.
Yeah, so Brian Kelly, based on him being pretty upfront about some topics in the SEC in regards to why he chose the SEC, why he chose LSU, not backing down from Alabama. I didn't know if he would come into Nashville guns a-blazing or not. Based on what I saw, not necessarily that. Was there anything of substance that you got from BK?
The one thing I like about Brian is he is very open and honest at SEC Media Days pretty much every year, and just pretty much at any press conference setting. He brought up, the idea that this team might be another year away. He brought up, some concerns with some certain units. Obviously, the secondary for LSU still needs to be sorted out after, it was a rough spring game and some rough moments during spring. But overall, obviously, he's very confident in this team, and he's very confident in Jaden Daniels. So, for the most part, I think BK really feels that this team could do something special. But at the same time, Mark, it does seem he wants to temper expectations as well. So for me, Mark, this team is very talented. The people in that room believe that team is very talented. And obviously, the matchup, Florida State, shout out to, all the Florida State stuff you do, Mark. I'm really excited about the season opener.
Yeah, so what I caught from BK, and again, I'm going to go back and check out everything because I got about halfway through with Brian Kelly, but he was a bit reserved. And I know that he knows, of course, what's out there, and that LSU is a bit of a chic pick for a lot of people to get through the West and challenge Georgia, maybe get to a playoff spot as a second SEC entry. And he is kind of pumping the brakes on that. Still wants to say, hey, I love this team. I love what we're doing. We've made tons of progress, and it's not like we can't do it, but we've got work to do. Where do you think, and that's where the statements, based on what I've seen, have stopped. Where do you believe that he thinks that work has to be done?
Yeah, obviously, not only the secondary, Mark, but just the overall depth of the team. I think for me, and just, what people have told me up to this point, they feel really good about their 1.5 units, right? So their first unit and maybe a rotational piece at pretty much defensive line, linebacker, so on and so on. I think overall he's worried about the depth of this team. And obviously this is something that LSU's had to do, and they're not the only team that's needed to do this, but they have relied a lot on the transfer portal. Obviously, at some key positions such as quarterback. This year, their starting edge linebacker, Ovia Gufu, is a transfer who's played under Brian Kelly before at Notre Dame. Obviously, their best traditional linebacker is probably Ovia Gufu, and the most traditional off-ball linebacker since. He's also a transfer. So I think for BK, it does make him a little heebie-jeebie that the team is relying so much on transfers. And Mark, as you know, when you go to a new setting, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful in that new setting. So one thing I really think he feels is the high school evaluation and the high school development of his players when they actually get to LSU. It needs to get better. And I agree with them. I really, really do. So I feel depth is his biggest concern, especially after how the team wore down at the end of those Texas A&M and Georgia games.
You brought up Jaden Daniels. I really, in the time that you just mentioned the name, kind of reviewed the season and thought, for one thing, they were really a scoring machine down the stretch. They were averaging about 40 points per game the last 4 or 5 games. And then also, and he did this at Arizona State from the time he was a freshman when he stepped on campus, there is no lead that is not insurmountable with a Jaden Daniels led offense. They came back against Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Auburn, double-digit games in all of those. So it's cool to have that kind of guy leading the offense where, whatever predicament, we trust this guy and we think he can lead us back.
Yeah, we've done a lot of breakdowns on the channel of where Jaden needs to improve and where Jaden is elite. When it comes to scramble yards, he is by far the best in college football. When it comes to turnover-worthy play percentage, Jaden Daniels was by far the best in college football. But those things, while they are good, it also correlates with potentially not taking enough chances, which Jaden didn't do a lot of as far as throwing the football down the field. He obviously hit some vertical shots, but there were more there for the taking. And obviously the scrambling is a really big part of his game. But I feel as if Jaden and LSU and the overall offense wants him to sit in and trust the development of the play, trust the receivers, and actually drive the football down the field vertically. And it's not just vertically, Mark. One thing that I've been hearing repeatedly is the need for the team to generate explosives in the intermediate, where you're giving them elite neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr., a ball that they can catch and run and do something with after the fact. So in other words, yards after the catcher, otherwise known as yak. So that's something else offensively that they are trying to develop going into next year. And obviously, if Jaden gets just a little bit better in all those things, he has a very good shot of potentially going to New York City next year.
And Carter, that's also got to be that offensive surge the back half of the season, that extremely young offensive line coming of age. And now when we get them through another year of strength and conditioning, working together, it's got to be the most cohesive unit on the field to be successful, that they could be maybe the best offensive line in the country this season.
Right. Yeah, no, they'll be up there. I mean, obviously, Georgia returns basically all their key guys, and they're going to be the offensive line to beat per se, especially since, Michigan's won this Joe Moore Award the last couple of years. But obviously, LSU is very well in the realm of possibility of winning that award this next year as well, with Will Campbell and Emory Jones coming back for their true sophomore seasons. And then they bring in Lance Hurd, their highest rated recruit, coming in as a 5-star offensive tackle. And I know Lance. I've interviewed Lance, and he was actually teammates of Will Campbell in high school at Neville. So there are, there's some steam for Lance to potentially move to offensive tackle and Emory Jones move to offensive guard. But I think they'll start like they had it last year with left tackle Will Campbell and Emory Jones at right tackle. But for those that don't like getting into the offensive line minutia, this should be a very, very good unit outside of those two guys as well. So we'll see how it works out.
It's Carter the Power on Twitter, Power Hour LSU, Power Hour SEC right here on YouTube. You got to check it out. Carter, elsewhere in the SEC, talking season again. And the one thing that I can guarantee about talking season is that the coaches whose teams are projected to be elite and getting way too heavy maybe for their comfort level, they talk them down. And the coaches whose teams are getting kicked around, they talk them up. That's right. The one thing. That's just the nature of coaches. We got to keep even keel. We got to, Kirby Smart was talking complacency. So is there any particular coach, any particular team, including the players, that you wanted to hear from this week, or already have caught the ear of anything in particular that's been stated out there?
Yeah, so this was actually the video we posted today on Power Hour SEC. And I actually decided to take the angle of the most popular reporter at SEC Media Day. He writes for the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and his name is Bob Holt. So he's been at every SEC Media Day since 1992, and he's been writing, covering Arkansas since 1981. So that is crazy. And, Bob is still a very youthful spirit, and I found something to be very interesting. So he always gets the first question in this big press room, right? And what I love and what drives other media members crazy is when the same reporter asks the same exact question to different coaches. I love it for this reason, because you get to see how different coaches react to, a similar question, right? Especially one that's kind of intrusive. And this is what he asked. He asked Jimbo Fisher and he asked Elijah Drinkowitz, what is it like giving up the play calling duties? And they both decided to do that this offseason. Obviously, Jimbo controversially with Bobby Petrino, and Elijah Drinkwitz a little bit lower key, giving it to a young guy named Kirby Moore. And their answers couldn't have been more opposite in how it was handled. One coach gave a very egotistical, don't want to hand the reins over to Bobby Petrino. And the other coach was like, hey, I wasn't good at calling plays here these first couple of years at Missouri. I need someone else to do this because I'm stretched too thin. Right. And I found that to be so interesting because Hugh Freeze ended up getting asked that same question by a different reporter, and his answer was kind of in the middle. He also gave up play calling duties, which I didn't know. I didn't know Hugh Freeze wasn't going to call the plays. I knew that they had Philip Montgomery, but I didn't know. I thought he was still going to call the shots because he always has. So to me, Mark, I think that's so interesting because a lot of fans don't actually know how play calls actually work. A lot of fans don't understand the decision about being in the booth or being on the sideline, or how much input does a head coach actually have. So I found that to be so fascinating, just simply because we don't really know how that works. And we also got to see that Jimbo Fisher is going to walk himself into a corner because he doesn't realize he is the worst play caller in the SEC.
Yeah, Jimbo just needs to back off a little bit and understand, hey, I'm still going to get the credit when we win.
Exactly.
Let's do all the things required to win, even if that's let's not get in the way of winning.
Yeah, and one more thing on that. Bobby Petrino is, and you've been covering college football, so you know this a lot better than most. I think people forget how good those Louisville offenses were immediately, right? I know we remember the Lamar Jackson years because those are recent, and Lamar's one of the biggest sports stars on the planet now. But what was it, Stephon LaFours, Louisville? Yeah, but now that's a deep cut right there. But right when he was hired from Auburn to be the head coach of Louisville, those offenses were elite. They were first in yards per play in that first season. They were second in yards per play, and they were third in yards per play his third season, only behind Texas and USC, those 05 teams. So this guy is the most prolific offensive play caller in college football, and Jimbo still won't just say, hey, I'll let you do it. Nobody cares, Jimbo. Nobody cares who calls the plays. The only thing the fans want is a winning season. They don't want to see 5-7 again, but Jimbo can't just admit to the public that he sucks at it now. Now he was good at it at LSU and Florida State, but he just needs to give it up. It's just so crazy to me.
Folks, look up the Arkansas numbers from 2010, 2011 when they went to the Sugar Bowl and Cotton Bowl with Ryan Mallett at quarterback.
R.I.P. Yeah, he was great, man. He was absolutely great.
Carter, good to see you, man. Always.
As always, man. You keep killing it, man. I see you doing the big things, Mark, and we'll talk soon, man. We'll talk closer to season. I need to get on with the Florida State homies again.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
we got the open invite, but yes, we will make that happen.
Yes, let's do it. All right, Mark. We'll see you, man.
Thanks, Carter.